Unit 3. Types of employment. This unit is designed to introduce types and procedures of employment and additional useful information in employer-employee relation to future FDI advisors. After acquiring knowledge from this unit, you will be able to understand and implement different types of employment procedure. Understand implementation of national legal provision from work and work relation fields. There are few types of employment based on legal regulations on which employment contract between employer and employee can be concluded. Any kind of employment contract defines obligations and protects the rights of both contracting parties, employee and employer. Permanent employment. Employment without termination. 8. Fixed-term employment. Employment with specified reason for employment and termination. 8. Seasonal employment. Fixed-term employment with specified termination. 8. Permanent seasonal employment. The occupational record goes even though employee does not work. During standby, employer pays monthly pension contribution, and health insurance is paid by the state. 1. The employment boost measure. Employment procedure. When searching for adequate workforce, employers make job advertisement in which all data about the position, competencies, skills, and required level of education is written. Before publishing job ad, in order to find an appropriate employee, employer has a possibility to use help from the Croatian Employment Service to adjust ad to his needs. Application needs for worker to the Croatian Employment Service can be submitted on the application form PR. There is no legal obligation for the employer to report employment service or any other public institution about job application or its results. Job advertisement can be published on several web pages. Croatian Employment Service. My Job. Job. Other employment agencies' web pages. There are following steps after job ads expiration. 8. Review of received CV. Interview and candidate selection. Employers and employees' obligations. When employer has chosen a candidate, the following steps are required. Gathering and validation of other documentation of the selected candidate. Documents listed or attached to the curriculum vitae of the selected candidate are only candidate's personal statements or documentation which proves that conditions of the application are fulfilled. Additional documentation is required when employment contract is signed for the work evidence, legal service, and accounting needs, salary calculation division. In order for the employer to ensure that he will have all the necessary documentation in time to fulfill his obligations accepted by signing the employment contract, he/she has the right to request a complete documentation before signing the employment contract. For the complete list of potentially necessary additional documentation, see Annex 5.3.1a, please. Gathering all extra documentation which is obligated in specific business branches. An applicant can have valid certificates from his former employer, for example sanitary examinations certificate, caterer, hairdresser, beautician, hygienic minimum certificate, caterer, and/or medical examinations certificate, construction workers. If validation date of mentioned documents is expired, employer's obligation is to obtain employee new certificate. Mentioned documents expense is paid by the employer. Presentation and acceptance of labor regulation. The employer is obligated to give employee labor regulation, if there is any, to read and sign its acceptance. On the other hand, employee has to read it and sign decision of its acceptance. Work safety and fire protection. Work safety is a legal obligation for the employer. If he is not qualified himself or has not qualified employee, he must use external associate services. With each new employment, worker has to pass work safety exam. Each employee has to obtain also the fire protection certificate, however employee can present this certificate to the new employer, even though it was issued at the former employer. Employment contract. After employer is ensured that has all necessary documentation, and it is in order to legal requirements and his business policy, the last step can be fulfilled. Drawing up and signing employment contract. There are standard employment contract forms for indefinite and fixed term period which contains all basic elements and regulations that the contract must have. If wanted, the employer can make employment contract with more details and regulations. All regulations included in employment contract must be in accordance with labor law and other legal regulation foreseen for specific cases or certain profession. For basic information about labor contract content, see Annex 5.3.1b please. Fixed-term employment contract specifics. The fixed-term employment contract can be made in only unique cases. Conditions, duration and renewal possibilities are regulated by labor law, Article 12 and 13. Fixed-term contract reasons can be replacement for an absent employee, large amount of work, seasonal employment, other. Teleworking contract specifics. A teleworking contract, work from home, has prescribed content as well as standard employment contract in which additional conditions can be added. Some of the additional elements can be equipment use, materials, communication costs payment, responsible person define, work time, work organization, quality and quantity of products services, business time frame. However, health and work protection regulations are not optional, they must be included in this type of employment contract. Other employer-employee obligations. Some specific business legislation requires that employees pass additional exams, for example. In some industries connected with user customers' health protection, employee is obligated to make sanitary examination. Sanitary certificate has to be renewed within the legal deadline. Employees in catering industry must pass hygienic minimum exam. Construction workers are obligated to do health examination before employment. Additionally, each employer is obliged to choose a specialist of occupational medicine for his employees, usually according to the working place, filling in the appropriate form verified by a stamp and signature of the responsible person. The employees have to be informed about the responsible chosen specialist of occupational medicine. Some examples of occupational medicine are selection change of a specialist of occupational medicine. Form RA. An order for assessment of the worker's health ability. Form NR-1 an order for assessment of the worker's health ability for night work. Report of worker's medical examination about his health ability to work with the computer. These and more other forms can be found on the website of Croatian Institute for Health Protection and Safety at Work. You should inform your client about additional requirements at the selected specialist of occupational medicine and public health institute. Registration in retirement and health insurance system. When hiring the first employee, employer must make a registration in Social and Retirement Security Subject Registry. Next to the registration form, following documentation must be attached. Legal entity. Decision of registration in the court register. Decision from Croatian Central Bureau of Statistics about the company's business activity in line with the National Classification of Business Activities. Natural person, SP. Decision of registration in Trade Registry. Work record book of the employee. Identity card copy of the employee. Confirmation of the beginning of personal insurance on the form. In case of for foreign citizens, work permit. Registration forms for legal entity and natural person are the same. Form M11P for retirement security. Form 1 for health insurance. Employer who has 2 and less employees brings in-person employment registration forms at the Retirement and Health Insurance Office. Employee registration and changes during employment of official retirement insurance webpage is obligated when hiring 3 and more employees. When registering new employees, in the retirement and health insurance, following documents are needed. Filled form for retirement insurance registration, Form N1P. Filled form for health insurance registration, Form 2. Filled, signed and stamped employment contract by employer and employee. Copy of employee's identity card. In case of employee's registration through internet, health insurance form is not needed, because the registration is managed automatically through the retirement insurance system. In case that employer registers employees in person, this is possible for the first 2 ones. He needs to register them in both insurance systems and be very careful to register them in the retirement system before they start working, since there are serious fines if this requirement is not fulfilled. Application forms may be found on the websites of Croatian Pension Insurance Institute and Croatian Institute for Health Insurance. Employer who has 20 employees or more must hire a certain number of people with disabilities. If employer don't fulfill this obligation, he has to pay monthly fees according to the formula prescribed by the law. General conditions of employment are defined by labor law, professional rehabilitation law and employment of persons with disabilities, and in some cases by collective agreements. Detailed information about employment of disabled persons, prescribed formula, professional rehabilitation and employment of disabled persons and regulations may be found on the webpage of Croatian Dental Medicine Chamber. Unemployed board member, director and managerial contract. Unemployed board member and company's executive director is obligated to register at Croatian Retirement Insurance Registry. This applies for board member who is not employed in any company in Croatia or other country which has signed agreement on double taxation avoidance with Croatia. In this case, retirement insurance institution will make a decision of retirement, health insurance, and work protection contributions. These contributions are board member private obligation and it cannot be part of business expense. The base for payment of contribution is the minimum base defined for payment of contribution by the order on the amounts of bases of statutory insurance contribution for 2018. Article 8, Number 6 and Article 19.1, base for payment of contribution for employed board member or company's executive director is substantially lower. In some cases investors want to have managerial contract with board member or company's executive director to define and protect each other's interests. There is no standard form for the managerial contract. However, it should include detailed responsibilities description, manager's commitment when company representing, contract conclusion, organization and business control, and other. Manager's rights like for ex-business phone, vehicles, and apartment use are also defined in this contract. Managerial contract can be employment contract in the same time, and it can be concluded without employment. More information about other working contracts possibilities without establishing the employment relationship you can read in Annex 5.3.3.